Marcus sprinted through Edinburgh's streets, his mind racing faster than his feet. The palace was 12 minutes away by car, 8 minutes if he ignored traffic laws. But he was on foot, and every second counted. His radio crackled with confused chatter as other officers tried to understand what was happening at multiple locations simultaneously. As he ran, Marcus pulled out his secure phone and tried to reach Inspector Park, who was supposed to be coordinating security at the palace dinner. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried the palace command center. No answer. He tried the backup communication channel. Static. The communication blackout wasn't an accident. The attackers had found a way to isolate the palace security team at the exact moment they planned to strike. Marcus flagged down a taxi and showed his identification to the startled driver. Emergency situation. Get me to Holyrood Palace as fast as possible. During the frantic drive, Marcus tried to piece together the attacker's strategy. The museum incident was perfectly designed to draw attention and resources away from the palace. The timing ensured that key personnel would be dealing with the diversion when the real attack began. But something else was bothering Marcus. The captured suspect had been too easy to catch, too willing to reveal information about the plan. Professional attackers didn't give up operational details unless they wanted to be caught or unless the information served their purposes. Marcus realized with growing horror that the attackers might have planned for someone to figure out their strategy. They wanted a security officer to rush to the palace because it fit into their larger plan. The taxi screeched to a halt outside the palace gates. Marcus threw money at the driver and ran toward the main entrance, showing his credentials to the guards on duty. Everything appeared normal, no signs of disturbance, no indication of any security problems. But Marcus had learned to trust his instincts, and his instincts were screaming that danger was near. The palace guard at the entrance, Sergeant Collins, looked confused when Marcus arrived. I thought you were assigned to the museum event tonight. Change of plans. Where's Inspector Park? He's inside coordinating dinner security. Everything's been quiet here. Marcus nodded, but continued moving toward the main building. If the attack hadn't started yet, he might still have time to prevent it. But if he was wrong about the threat, he would have abandoned his assigned post and violated protocol without justification. As Marcus entered the palace, he tried once more to reach Inspector Park on the radio. This time he got a response, but the signal was weak and filled with interference. Marcus? What are you doing here? I thought. Inspector Park's voice faded in and out. Sir, I have reason to believe the museum incident was a diversion. The real attack may be targeting the dinner event. Marcus couldn't hear Inspector Park's response clearly, but he thought he caught the words, all clear, and no problems. But Marcus had noticed something that made his blood run cold. The interference on the radio wasn't random static. It had a pattern, a rhythmic quality that suggested deliberate signal jamming rather than technical malfunction. Someone was actively blocking their communications, and they were doing it from close range. Marcus moved quickly through the palace corridors, following the route to the private dining room where the royal family was scheduled to have dinner with Scottish officials. The hallways were quieter than usual, with fewer staff members visible than he would expect during a high-level event. As he approached the dining area, Marcus heard voices and the gentle sound of conversation that suggested the dinner was proceeding normally. But his training told him to verify the situation visually before relaxing his guard. Marcus positioned himself where he could observe the dining room without being seen. What he saw made his heart race. The dinner was indeed taking place, but there were subtle details that weren't right. Two of the servers were men Marcus didn't recognize from the palace staff. One of the Scottish officials was sitting in a position that would give him a clear line of sight to the royal family members, but also quick access to an exit. Most concerning of all, Marcus noticed that Inspector Park and two other security officers were standing in positions that looked normal but would actually limit their ability to respond quickly if something went wrong. Marcus realized he was looking at the final stages of an incredibly sophisticated operation. The attackers hadn't infiltrated the dinner as guests. They had replaced key staff members and possibly compromised one of the officials. They had positioned themselves perfectly to carry out their attack, while the regular security team was unknowingly helping them by standing in the wrong places. Marcus faced an impossible decision. If he was right about the threat, he needed to act immediately to prevent an attack. But if he was wrong, interrupting a formal dinner attended by the royal family and government officials would end his career and create an international incident. The decision was made for him when he saw one of the servers reach into his jacket in a motion that Marcus recognized from his training. The man was drawing a weapon. Marcus burst into the dining room, shouting warnings and drawing his own sidearm in one fluid motion. The next few seconds were chaos as guests dove for cover. Security officers tried to understand what was happening, and the attackers revealed themselves. The server Marcus had been watching dropped his pretense and raised a pistol toward the royal family's table. But Marcus was already moving, putting himself between the gunman and his target while calling for backup on his radio. Inspector Park and the other officers reacted instantly, their training overriding their confusion about Marcus's unexpected appearance. They moved to protect the guests while identifying additional threats in the room. The fake Scottish official proved to be another attacker, producing a device that Marcus recognized as a sophisticated explosive. But the man's training had prepared him for a different scenario, where the security team would be caught off guard and unable to respond effectively. Instead, the attackers found themselves facing alert, experienced officers who had been warned about the threat and were ready to counter their moves. The confrontation was brief, but intense. Marcus exchanged gunfire with the first attacker while Inspector Park moved to neutralize the threat from the explosive device. The other security officers efficiently evacuated the guests while securing the area. When the shooting stopped, both attackers were down, the guests were safe, and the immediate threat was over. But Marcus knew the investigation was just beginning. Emergency responders flooded the palace within minutes. Medical teams treated the wounded, explosive ordnance specialists secured the device, and intelligence officers began processing the scene for evidence. Commander Hayes arrived within the hour, her expression mixing relief and concern as she surveyed the aftermath of the attack. Marcus found himself being questioned by multiple investigators who wanted to understand exactly how he had identified the threat and why he had abandoned his assigned post. The debriefing process lasted for days. Marcus had to explain his decision-making process step by step, justify every action he had taken, and help investigators understand how the attackers had planned such a sophisticated operation. What emerged from the investigation was a sobering picture of how close the attack had come to succeeding. The terrorists had spent months studying royal security procedures, identifying vulnerabilities, and developing a plan that exploited the natural tendency to focus resources on the most obvious threats. The museum diversion had been designed not just to draw away personnel, but to create a specific pattern of radio communications that would allow the attackers to identify and jam the frequencies used by palace security. The communication blackout had been precisely timed to prevent coordination between different security teams. Most chilling of all, the fake Scottish official had been working with legitimate government credentials. The attackers had somehow compromised an actual member of the Scottish government staff, either through coercion or recruitment. Marcus learned that his decision to trust his instincts and investigate the palace had prevented what intelligence analysts later described as potentially the most serious attack on the royal family in decades. But the recognition came with a price. Marcus's identity as a protection officer was now known to everyone involved in the investigation. His cover as an anonymous guard was permanently blown, and his ability to work in covert security roles was compromised. Commander Hayes called Marcus into her office a week after the incident to discuss his future with the protection unit. "Marcus, your actions that night were exemplary," she began. "Your quick thinking and decisive response prevented a tragedy. However, your profile is now too high for continued work in royal protection. Too many people know who you are and what you're capable of." Marcus felt a mixture of pride and sadness. He had accomplished what every protection officer hoped to achieve. He had successfully protected his assigned principals from a serious threat. But, in doing so, he had ended his career in the role he had grown to love. "What are my options?" Marcus asked. "Several, actually. Your performance has been noticed at the highest levels of government. We'd like to offer you a position training the next generation of protection officers. You would be sharing your experience and expertise with new recruits, helping them develop the same instincts and skills that made you so effective. The offer was attractive, but Marcus needed time to consider his options. He had spent years building his identity around being the guard that nobody noticed, the professional who worked in the shadows to keep others safe. Now he would have to find a new way to serve, a new role that would allow him to use his skills while adjusting to a more public profile. Marcus accepted the training position, but he also made another decision. He began working on a comprehensive manual documenting the lessons learned from the Edinburgh incident. His goal was to ensure that future protection officers would be better prepared to recognize and counter sophisticated attacks. The manual became required reading for all new recruits in the Royal Protection Unit. Marcus's insights about threat assessment, communication protocols, and decision-making under pressure helped improve security procedures across the entire organization. Marcus also began speaking at security conferences, sharing his experience with protection professionals from around the world. His presentation about the Edinburgh incident became one of the most requested sessions at international security symposiums. But, perhaps most importantly, Marcus maintained his commitment to service. Whether he was training new officers, developing security protocols, or sharing his expertise with international colleagues, he continued to work toward the same goal that had motivated him from the beginning: protecting people who dedicated their lives to serving others. Years later, when Marcus reflected on his career, he realized that being forced out of anonymity had actually allowed him to have a greater impact. Instead of protecting one family, he was now helping to protect dozens of officials, dignitaries, and public servants around the world. The guard who had once been invisible to everyone had become a teacher, mentor, and leader whose influence extended far beyond any single assignment. Marcus Chun had learned that true service sometimes means stepping out of the shadows, even when the shadows are where you prefer to be. His story became proof that the most effective protectors are often the ones whose names and faces nobody knows, but whose dedication and skill make everyone safer. The royal family never learned the name of the guard whose quick thinking and courage had saved their lives that night in Edinburgh. But Marcus didn't need their recognition. He had the satisfaction of knowing he had done his job exactly as he had been trained to do, professionally, effectively, and without seeking credit or glory. That, Marcus realized, was the highest honor any protection officer could achieve. The call came at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday in November. Marcus was deep in sleep when his secure phone buzzed with the distinctive tone that meant emergency deployment. He was dressed and out the door within 10 minutes, his mind already shifting into the focused state that years of training had made automatic. Commander Hayes was waiting in the briefing room when Marcus arrived, along with 5 other officers he recognized as the most experienced members of the Royal Protection Unit. The serious expressions on their faces told Marcus this was not a routine assignment. "Gentlemen, we have a situation," Commander Hayes began without preamble. "Intelligence services have received credible information about a planned attack targeting members of the royal family during their upcoming visit to Edinburgh. The threat assessment indicates a sophisticated operation with international connections." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. This was the scenario every protection officer trained for but hoped never to face. A real, immediate threat against the people they had sworn to protect. Commander Hayes continued the briefing, explaining that the royal family's schedule in Edinburgh included several public appearances, a charity event at the National Museum, and a private dinner with Scottish government officials. Each event presented different security challenges and potential vulnerabilities. "The attack is planned for some time during the 3-day visit," she said. "We don't know the specific target, the exact method, or the precise timing. What we do know is that at least 4 individuals with military training have entered the country specifically for this purpose." The room fell silent as the officers absorbed this information. Marcus had dealt with isolated threats and unstable individuals, but never anything approaching this level of organization and sophistication. Inspector Park raised his hand. "What's our intelligence on the attacker's background and capabilities?" "Limited, but concerning," Commander Hayes replied. "At least 2 are former military with explosive ordnance training. One has a background in surveillance and reconnaissance. The 4th individual's expertise is unknown, but all 4 entered the country using false identities that required significant resources to create." Marcus realized this was far beyond anything local law enforcement could handle alone. The operation would require coordination between multiple agencies, careful planning for every possible scenario, and flawless execution under enormous pressure. Your job, Commander Hayes concluded, is to ensure the safety of the royal family while maintaining their scheduled appearances. The government has decided not to cancel the visit, as that would represent a victory for the attackers and set a dangerous precedent for future threats. The next 6 hours were spent in intensive planning. Marcus and his colleagues studied building blueprints, mapped evacuation routes, coordinated with local police and military units, and developed contingency plans for dozens of potential scenarios. Marcus was assigned to the advance team, which meant he would travel to Edinburgh 2 days before the royal visit to conduct final security preparations and coordinate with local authorities. It was a critical role that required him to identify potential vulnerabilities and ensure that every security measure was properly implemented. The flight to Edinburgh gave Marcus time to review the threat assessment files and study the detailed schedules for each event. The attackers had chosen their timing well. The royal visit included several public appearances that would be difficult to secure completely. Edinburgh's police chief, Superintendent Margaret Ross, met Marcus and the advance team at the airport. She was a seasoned officer with 20 years of experience, but Marcus could see the stress of the situation in her eyes. "We've never dealt with anything like this," Superintendent Ross admitted as they drove toward the city center. "International terrorists targeting the royal family in our city. Every officer in the department is working overtime, and we've called in additional support from Glasgow and Aberdeen." The first stop was the National Museum of Scotland, where the royal family would attend a charity fundraising event. Marcus spent 3 hours examining every entrance, exit, and potential hiding spot in the building. He coordinated with museum security to review staff credentials and implement additional screening procedures. The museum presented significant challenges. It was a large, complex building with multiple levels and numerous rooms that could provide concealment for attackers. Worse, the charity event would include nearly 200 guests, each of whom would need thorough security screening. Marcus worked with the museum's head of security to develop a comprehensive protection plan. They would position officers at every entrance, install additional surveillance cameras in key areas, and establish secure routes for emergency evacuation if needed. The second location was Holyrood Palace, where the royal family would have dinner with Scottish officials. This venue was easier to secure due to its existing security infrastructure, but it also presented unique challenges due to its historical significance and tourist traffic. Marcus spent the afternoon walking through every room the royal family would visit, checking sight lines, communications equipment, and coordination protocols with palace security staff. He also reviewed the guest list for the dinner, working with intelligence officers to verify the background of every attendee. By evening, Marcus felt confident about the security preparations, but he also understood that the attackers would have been studying the same locations and looking for weaknesses in their defenses. The advantage belonged to whoever could anticipate their opponent's plans most accurately. That night, Marcus barely slept. He reviewed security protocols, studied building plans, and mentally rehearsed emergency procedures. At 4 a.m., his phone buzzed with an update from the intelligence team. Surveillance had spotted 2 of the suspected attackers near the museum, apparently conducting reconnaissance. The net was tightening, but it wasn't clear whether the security forces were closing in on the attackers or walking into a trap. The royal family arrived in Edinburgh on Thursday afternoon, and Marcus took his position as part of the close protection detail. The first event was a public appearance at Edinburgh Castle, where hundreds of people had gathered to see the royal family tour the historic fortress. Marcus positioned himself near the main entrance to the castle, scanning the crowd for anything unusual while maintaining radio contact with officers stationed throughout the area. The atmosphere was festive, with families bringing children to wave flags and take pictures. But Marcus knew that somewhere in that cheerful crowd, or perhaps watching from a nearby building, were people who wanted to cause harm to the individuals he was sworn to protect. The castle visit proceeded without incident, but Marcus noticed several things that concerned him. a man in a dark jacket who seemed more interested in the security arrangements than the royal family, a woman with a large camera bag who positioned herself near potential escape routes, a maintenance van parked outside the normal service area. Each observation was noted and passed along to the surveillance team, who would investigate further. In protection work, paranoia was a professional asset, not a personal flaw. Friday morning brought the most challenging event, the charity fundraiser at the National Museum. Nearly 200 guests would be in attendance, and the venue's complex layout made comprehensive security coverage extremely difficult. Marcus arrived at the museum 2 hours before the event to conduct final security checks. Everything appeared to be in order. Additional officers were in position, surveillance equipment was functioning properly, and guest screening procedures were ready to begin. But as Marcus walked through the main exhibition hall, something felt wrong. He couldn't identify exactly what was bothering him, but his instincts were warning him that danger was near. The guest arrival process went smoothly for the first hour. Marcus watched from his position near the main staircase as attendees were screened and escorted to the reception area. The atmosphere was elegant and relaxed, with guests enjoying champagne and conversation while waiting for the royal family to arrive. Then, Marcus noticed him, a man in an expensive suit who had passed through security screening. But something about his behavior was setting off alarm bells in Marcus's mind. The man was scanning the room methodically, paying particular attention to the locations of security officers. His movements were too purposeful, too calculated for a typical guest at a charity event. Marcus activated his radio to alert other officers while keeping the suspicious man in sight. Within minutes, a plainclothes officer approached the man and began a casual conversation designed to assess whether he posed a genuine threat. But the man was ready for this approach. He smoothly deflected the officer's questions while gradually moving toward an emergency exit that would take him out of the main reception area. Marcus realized they were dealing with a professional who had anticipated their security measures and planned accordingly. This wasn't an impulsive attack by an unstable individual. It was part of a sophisticated operation. The situation escalated quickly. As Marcus moved to intercept the suspicious man, 2 other individuals in different parts of the museum began behaving in ways that suggested they were working together. One man, near the gift shop, started moving toward the main staircase. A woman by the coat check began reaching into her purse. Marcus found himself in the middle of a coordinated attack involving multiple individuals positioned throughout the museum. His training kicked in automatically. Alert all officers, protect civilians, neutralize threats, and maintain communication. The next few minutes were a blur of rapid movement and split-second decisions. Marcus pursued the man in the suit while other officers moved to intercept the additional suspects. The museum's alarm system activated, and guests began moving toward exits in confusion. The man Marcus was pursuing proved to be well-trained and dangerous. He led Marcus through a maze of exhibition halls and service corridors, clearly familiar with the building's layout. But Marcus had spent days studying the museum's blueprint, and he was able to anticipate the man's movements. The chase ended in the museum's loading dock, where Marcus cornered the suspect. The man turned to face him, and Marcus saw something in his eyes that made him realize how close they had come to a genuine tragedy. "You're too late," the man said with a slight accent Marcus couldn't identify. The real target was never here. Marcus felt his blood turn cold as he realized what the man meant. The museum event was a diversion. The real attack was happening somewhere else, at the same time, while the security forces were focused on the wrong location. The royal family's private dinner at Holyrood Palace was scheduled to begin in less than an hour, with a much smaller security detail because it was considered a low-risk event. If the attackers had planned their operation correctly, they would strike when the protection resources were divided between multiple locations. Marcus immediately radioed the command center to warn them about the situation. But, as he waited for confirmation, he realized that communication with the palace security team had been cut off. The attackers had not only planned a diversion, they had also found a way to isolate their real target from backup support. Marcus found himself facing the most challenging decision of his career. He could stay at the museum to help process the captured suspects and secure the scene. Or he could abandon protocol and rush to the palace, where the royal family might be walking into a trap without adequate protection. The choice was clear, but the consequences of being wrong could end his career and potentially put more lives at risk. Marcus had seconds to decide, and the lives of the people he had sworn to protect hung in the balance. He made his choice and began running toward the exit, knowing that the next hour would test every skill he had developed and every instinct he had learned to trust. Marcus Chin stood at attention outside the palace gates, his black uniform crisp and spotless. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard as tourists gathered behind the red rope barriers, cameras clicking at the guards who never moved, never spoke, never acknowledged their existence. What none of them knew was that the quiet man in the ceremonial uniform had spent the last 15 years of his life protecting people in ways they could never imagine. Marcus had grown up in the rough neighborhoods of East London, where survival meant learning to read people quickly and trust your instincts. His father worked double shifts at a factory while his mother cleaned offices at night. They never had much money, but they had something more valuable. They had each other. When Marcus was 12, everything changed. His father collapsed at work from a heart attack. The medical bills piled up faster than his mother could pay them. Marcus watched his strong, proud mother work herself to exhaustion, taking on extra cleaning jobs just to keep food on the table. That was when Marcus decided he would find a way to help his family. But he was just a kid with no special skills and no connections. What he did have was determination and a natural ability to notice things others missed. During lunch breaks at school, Marcus would sit by the playground fence and watch the street. He learned to spot which cars belonged to which neighbors, which delivery trucks came at what times, and which strangers didn't belong in the area. It became a game at first, but soon Marcus realized he was developing skills that could be useful. When he turned 16, Marcus applied to join the local police cadets program. The training was tough, but he threw himself into every exercise, every lesson, every challenge. His instructors noticed that Marcus had an unusual talent for observation and quick decision-making under pressure. After completing the cadet program, Marcus faced a choice. He could join the regular police force, or he could apply for something more challenging. His instructor, Sergeant Williams, pulled him aside one day after training. "Marcus, you have potential for something bigger than regular patrol work," Sergeant Williams said. "Have you ever thought about protection services?" Marcus wasn't sure what that meant, but he was interested. Sergeant Williams explained that there were specialized units that protected important people, government officials, foreign visitors, and, yes, even members of the royal family. The idea of protecting people instead of just arresting criminals appealed to Marcus. He had grown up watching his parents struggle, and he understood what it meant to feel vulnerable. If he could use his skills to keep others safe, that seemed like a worthy purpose. The application process was intense. Marcus had to pass physical fitness tests, psychological evaluations, background checks, and weeks of specialized training. Many candidates dropped out along the way, but Marcus pushed through every challenge. During training, Marcus met Sarah Thompson, another recruit who had grown up in similar circumstances. Sarah had joined the program after her younger brother was killed in a gang shooting. Like Marcus, she was driven by a desire to protect others from experiencing the pain her family had endured. The two became close friends during training, supporting each other through the difficult moments and celebrating each other's successes. Sarah was one of the few people who truly understood why Marcus had chosen this path. After months of preparation, Marcus graduated from the protection training program. His first assignment was working security at government buildings, not glamorous work, but essential training for learning how to assess threats and coordinate with other security personnel. Marcus spent 2 years in government security before receiving an unexpected phone call. His supervisor wanted to meet with him about a new opportunity, but wouldn't discuss details over the phone. When Marcus arrived at the meeting, he found himself sitting across from Commander Elizabeth Hayes, a woman with steel gray hair and sharp eyes who seemed to see everything at once. "Mr. Chun," Commander Hayes began, "your record shows exceptional performance in threat assessment and crowd management. We're considering you for a position that would require the highest levels of discretion and professionalism." Marcus listened carefully as Commander Hayes explained that they were looking for candidates to join the Royal Protection Unit. The work would be demanding, the hours unpredictable, and the responsibility enormous. Most importantly, it would require complete anonymity. If you accept this position, Commander Hayes continued, your identity becomes classified. Your family and friends cannot know the true nature of your work. To the outside world, you're simply a ceremonial guard. In reality, you'll be part of an elite team responsible for protecting some of the most important people in the country. The offer was both exciting and terrifying. Marcus would be giving up any chance of public recognition for his service. His parents would never fully understand what he did for work, but he would be using his skills to serve his country in the most direct way possible. Marcus accepted the position without hesitation. The advanced training was unlike anything Marcus had experienced before. He learned advanced combat techniques, emergency medical procedures, surveillance detection, and crisis management. He studied the layouts of dozens of buildings, memorized evacuation procedures, and practiced coordinating with various law enforcement agencies. Most importantly, he learned how to blend into the background while remaining constantly alert. The best protection officers, his instructors explained, were the ones nobody noticed until something went wrong. Marcus's first royal assignment was working security for a charity event attended by several minor members of the royal family. He spent the evening positioned near the main entrance, watching the crowd and monitoring radio communications from other officers. Nothing dramatic happened that night, but Marcus felt the weight of responsibility in a way he never had before. Every person who entered the building was a potential threat. Every unusual movement or behavior required assessment. Every decision could mean the difference between a successful event and a tragedy. Over the following months, Marcus worked dozens of similar events: garden parties, museum openings, charity galas, and public appearances. He became skilled at reading crowds, identifying potential problems before they developed, and communicating efficiently with his team. His supervisors noticed Marcus's exceptional performance. He had a natural ability to remain calm under pressure and make quick decisions when situations changed rapidly. More importantly, he had learned to do his job so smoothly that most people never realized he was there. After a year of successful assignments, Marcus received his first major posting. He would be joining the permanent security detail for Kensington Palace, working directly with the officers who protected the royal family on a daily basis. The transition to palace security was a significant step up in responsibility. Marcus found himself working 12-hour shifts, maintaining constant vigilance while surrounded by tourists, staff members, and official visitors. Every day brought new challenges and potential security concerns. The palace itself was a complex environment to secure. There were dozens of entrances, hundreds of rooms, and constant activity as staff members, officials, and visitors moved throughout the building. Marcus had to learn the routines of everyone who worked there while remaining alert for anyone who didn't belong. His fellow officers welcomed Marcus warmly, but he soon learned that palace security operated under different rules than his previous assignments. The stakes were higher, the protocols more complex, and the margin for error essentially non-existent. Detective Inspector David Park, the senior officer on Marcus's shift, took him under his wing during the first few weeks. Inspector Park had been protecting the royal family for over a decade, and he understood the unique pressures of the job. The thing about this work, Inspector Park explained during a quiet moment, is that success means nothing happens. We never get congratulated for preventing incidents that the public never learns about. Our job is to be invisible until we're desperately needed. Marcus quickly discovered what Inspector Park meant. Most days were filled with routine activities: checking credentials, monitoring surveillance feeds, coordinating with local police, and maintaining equipment. But beneath the routine was constant awareness that everything could change in an instant. The first time Marcus encountered a genuine security threat, it happened so quickly he barely had time to think. A man in the tourist crowd began behaving erratically, shouting about government conspiracies and moving toward the palace gates with obvious agitation. Marcus immediately activated his radio to alert other officers while positioning himself between the agitated man and the gate. His training kicked in automatically: assess the threat, protect civilians, coordinate response, and resolve the situation with minimal disruption. Within minutes, additional officers arrived to assist. They were able to calm the man down and escort him away from the area without incident. To the tourists watching, it probably looked like a routine interaction. Marcus knew better. That evening, Inspector Park pulled Marcus aside for a debrief. They discussed what had happened, what had gone well, and what could be improved for similar situations in the future. "You handled that perfectly," Inspector Park said. "Quick assessment, immediate communication, and calm response. That's exactly what we need in this job." Marcus felt proud of his performance, but he also understood that he had experienced just a small taste of what the job could require. Real threats would be more dangerous, more complex, and more demanding of his skills and judgment. As months passed, Marcus settled into the rhythm of palace security. He learned to recognize regular visitors, understand the patterns of daily life in the palace, and coordinate smoothly with the various agencies involved in royal protection. What surprised Marcus most was how much he enjoyed the work despite its demands. Every day was different, every assignment brought new challenges, and he was constantly learning new skills. Most importantly, he felt that his work had genuine meaning and purpose. Marcus's parents were proud of his career, though they didn't fully understand what he did. When they asked about his work, he would simply say that he worked in government security. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the complete truth either. The secrecy was sometimes difficult. Marcus couldn't share stories about interesting events or challenging situations with his family and friends. He couldn't explain why his schedule was unpredictable or why he sometimes had to cancel plans at the last minute. But Marcus had found his calling. He was using his skills to serve his country and protect people who dedicated their lives to public service. The work was demanding, but it was also deeply satisfying in ways that few people would ever understand. Little did Marcus know that his most challenging assignment was still ahead of him, and it would test every skill he had developed over years of training and experience.